he healed me. So that kind of turned the corner for me. I'd heard about this guy, but I'd never actually seen anybody healed. And after seeing my neighbor carrying cement that couldn't walk 2 weeks before, I thought, well, there's something to it.
Well, had he been back to see him, or was it just the herbs?
This is his second trip. The first time this guy went to see John, John said, you're too weak to be healed. You need to build up your energy, and he sent him home.
Yeah.
And the second time he went, after taking the herbs and doing the exercises, John healed him.
That's when it happened then.
Yeah. And that happens, you know, sometimes people will go to see him, and he'll tell them, you know, I can't heal you, period. Or he'll say you need to take herbs or do some meditation or something, and it'll take time, you know, come back in 6 months or something. So
it's not instantaneous with everybody.
It's not instantaneous for most people. Most people take a little work.
Do you think it's because they have something of their own they have to work on?
I think so. I think it's their own energy and their own karma and their own whatever causes the illness. I saw one woman years ago who I actually sat across from at lunch one time. She was paralyzed on one side. It was a Brazilian woman who had had a stroke, and she couldn't eat. Her arm was paralyzed. Half her face was paralyzed. She was drooling. And during one of the sessions, the people sit in the room with John, and he has everybody close their eyes.
Yeah.
And he said, "Doctor, open your eyes." So I opened my eyes. And there was another doctor with me, so I nudged him and told him, "Hey, open your eyes." And he had this woman walking around the room, writing with her crippled hand, writing notes, messages. He had her walk around the room and open bottles of water and pour the water into cups for people. He had her pick up her wheelchair and walk it across the room and push it out the door. He had her lean down and touch her toes. He had her do all kinds of things which were totally physically impossible for her before she'd gone in that afternoon. I mean, she was literally paralyzed and had been paralyzed so that her right hand was all withered up and she couldn't move it. And here's this woman looking at her hand like it's not her own hand and opening bottles and writing notes with this hand that had been crippled up a few minutes before. So I have seen things like that where someone gets out of a wheelchair and walks and their withered hand is restored to normal just right in front of your eyes.
That's what I was going to ask you. It wasn't withered anymore?
No, it was like a normal hand. She kept holding it out in front of herself, looking at it like, holy mackerel, this isn't my hand. Like this is somebody else's hand. She couldn't believe her own hand as she looked at it.
Well, see, how the medical profession would explain something like that.
Oh, they wouldn't. There's no way in the world.
But, you know, they're always saying this is fake or that it's their imagination, or they make themselves believe. Well, we know faith and belief is very strong, but still, I don't think that would account for everything.
Well, I'm certain it accounts for some of it. I'm certain you know, that all healing, our own beliefs account for some of it.
Yeah, but I mean, the medical profession wouldn't be able to just shrug it off with that kind.
Some of these things
I've heard so many different things about it's like magic and things like that to fool people.
Well, I've experienced the surgery myself. I mean, he does. I'll just explain a little bit about the stuff he does. For most people, they walk in front of him in a line, and they're told to go sit down or go to have invisible surgery or do this or do that. They're given some kind of instructions.
Yeah.
And the room that he sits in is called the current room, and he tells a lot of people, just sit in my current. That's all you need to do to be healed. Just, you know, sit near me.
His energy field?
Yeah. And the people that sit near him, they're asked to keep their eyes closed. And, you know, and he says, actually, the best thing you can do when sitting near him is go to sleep, because you know, he doesn't need your mind involved in anything.
And that way you have your conscious mind out of the way.
Yeah. So most people that go in front of him, they get in line, they go in front of him, and he tells them what to do. Now, one of the things he tells people to do is go for surgery, and the surgery is invisible surgery. And invisible surgery means the spirits of the casa, the spirits of the place where he works, do the surgery. And so the people go into what's called a surgery room, which is just a big room with benches in it, and they sit there, and they close their eyes, and he'll come in and start the process. And then when he thinks it's done or when he knows it's done, he'll come in and say, in the name of Jesus Christ, rise and walk, you're all healed. And he'll send them out of the room. And they've had nothing physical done to them. And yet people will have profound experiences. Like some people will have marks on their body, like a cut, like a stripe of you know, blood coming out of their shirt or something like they've actually been cut on. Some people will have all kinds of side effects. But they ask people after the invisible surgery to go to their hotel wherever they're staying and lie down for 24 hours and don't do any work. Just lay there like you've been, like you've had a real operation in a real hospital.
Well, that's what I do with a lot of my work. Sometimes they get very sleepy afterwards.
Yeah, a lot of people will sleep for 20 hours after this visit.
Yeah, they email me later and say, is it normal that I wanted to sleep so much? And I think it's a lot of processing is going on, too.
A lot of processing goes on. Some people go home and cry for hours. Some people go home and sleep for hours. Some people have, like one woman whose eyes he worked on had red eyes. I saw her eyes afterwards. There were just tears coming out, and they were all bloodshot. But it was invisible surgery, but she'd asked for healing on her eyes. And after the invisible surgery, it looked like she'd had a real eye operation. I mean, her eyes were really a mess.
Well, that's what I tell people when they come to see me, and maybe they've driven 8 hours, and they want to turn around and drive back, and I tell them it's not a good idea.
No.
Because sometimes they won't even get very far down the road, and they'll have to stop and get a motel, because it's just like suddenly they're just so tired, and all they want to do is sleep.
Yeah, well, I think that's part of the process of healing. Sometimes you just, the people go into that kind of sleep.
Maybe we're tapping into kind of the same thing, just different ways.
Yeah.
But anyway, when he's doing the surgery, it's not like we hear about psychic surgeons.
Well, no, it is. That's the first kind of surgery I'm talking about, the invisible surgery, where people just sit there with their eyes closed and the spirits do the surgery. The second kind of surgery, he does 3 kinds of surgery. The second kind of surgery I call symbolic surgery, and I just made that name up because he actually does cuts on people with a kitchen knife or a scalpel, but the cuts are nothing known to medicine. Like if a person has high blood pressure, he'll make a little inch-long cut over their heart. A lot of times women, he will cut one breast or the other. He'll make a linear cut in the breast, and he'll stick his finger in and wiggle it around. Sometimes he'll do what looks like a hernia operation, sort of a cut in the groin. Sometimes he'll bend the person over and make a cut on their back. But these cuts are literal cuts. I mean, he cuts the person open, and then he takes a cotton thread like you'd sew your pants up with, and he puts a couple stitches in it and closes it sort of crudely, and they heal beautifully. They heal almost overnight.
Well, is there blood coming out when he makes the incision?
He can stop bleeding. He can stop and start it at will.
So when he cuts it, there's no blood?
There's no blood flow at all, and some of these cuts are pretty big. And he's asked me to sew them up, so I know they're real cuts. And I've actually, gone up and he said, "Doctor, you sew them up," and he's given me a needle and thread. And one time, this is another long story, but I had
That's
given.
Okay,
I had given
we've got time. We can explore a lot of things.
Yeah, I had given a lecture to the Florida Society of Dermatologic Surgery on difficult closures, and when I left, I had a pretty big head. I had a lot of pride about my talk. And the next day, I ended up in Brazil, and the first thing that happened to me when I went in to see him was he'd cut a guy open, and he said, "Doctor, come up here and sew this guy up." And so I'd been giving this lecture to other dermatologists on how to sew things up, and I thought, boy, I'm hot stuff. He hands me the needle, and I go to put it into the skin, and the skin's as hard as wood. I mean, the needle will not go through, and not only will it not go through, but it breaks when I'm trying to put it through. So I'm embarrassed to death. Long story short, I broke 5 needles. I couldn't get any needles to go through this guy's skin, and so he's looking around sort of amusedly while I'm breaking needles, and I'm sweating and getting more embarrassed. And then finally he says to me, "Now, doctor, I want you to do it like this. I want you to sew with love. I want you to just put as much love into your hands as you can." And the minute I did that, the needle went right through the guy's flesh and sewed him up easily. So he had done this whole thing just to break my pride, just to make me look like a fool, like I couldn't sew in front of hundreds of people. And it worked, obviously.
That's what I was wondering. Do you think he picked up on what you had just been going through?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this whole thing was a lesson to me. And at my expense, and it was amusing to everybody else. And even to this day, when I go to town, I hear people talk about the doctor who broke 5 needles, not realizing it's me.
Well, that would show one reason why there wouldn't be any blood if the skin becomes that hard.
Yeah, well, he can do it at will. He can make the skin hard. He can make it soft. He can make bleeding stop. He does sometimes some huge surgeries. One of the things, 2 of the things that are the most impressive to people are one thing we call the nose job, where he takes a hemostat, a great big long, 10-inch long hemostat, shoves it up someone's nose, And you think, when you see this thing go in, you think there's nowhere to go except their brain. I mean, this thing has nowhere to go except in their head.
Yeah.
And wouldn't it kill them or lobotomize them? Well, he did that to me one time. He shoved the thing up my nose. I could feel all these bones crunching in my sinuses where it went, but I never felt any pain at all.
Well, why did he do it? I mean, did you have something wrong?
I was deaf in my right ear, and I was going deaf in my left ear. I couldn't hear as well in my left ear, and I was terrified I'd be deaf.
Yeah.
And so I told him this, and he said, "Well, come up here for surgery." And he shoved the hemostat up my left nostril, which it was the right ear, but it was the left nostril. And then he took a scalpel and made a cut on my left neck, a big, long, linear cut. And at the time, I had all my faculties. I could think, but I couldn't feel any pain. And I was thinking to myself, well, hey, it's my right ear. Do the other side. You're doing the wrong side. Well, anyway, the next day I could hear just fine. And the cut on my neck healed up. So there's no scar at all. I can't even see where it was. And so I learned that this type of surgery that I call symbolic surgery, it works, but as far as medicine is concerned, we wouldn't have a clue why sticking something up someone's nose would help their hearing.
Yeah, I mean, as a physician, you wouldn't think that wouldn't do anything. And like you said, it could have gone all the way up to the brain.
Well, he says that it's injecting energy into the person. It's just a method of putting a lot of energy into the person. And the other surgery that he does, which I again call symbolic surgery, is he scrapes people's eyes. And I mean, he scrapes them. I've been right next to the person holding their head while he's scraping, and I've filmed dozens of these things 6 inches from the eyeball, and you can see the eyeball deflecting, and you can see the epithelium, the skin on the eye being shaved right off, and the person doesn't feel a thing. And
are they doing that because they're blind or what?
No. This is for stuff like a person comes in and they complain of heart pain, and all of a sudden they're getting eye surgery.
It's a different part of the body.
Again, it's an injection of energy into the person. That's what he says is happening. It has nothing to do with their eyes. It's operating on some other part of their body by putting energy in through the eyes. But it looks brutal and scary, and if you're squeamish, you wouldn't want to watch the movies I made.
But the person doesn't feel anything.
The person doesn't feel a thing. And
no blood or anything.
The corneal reflex is the strongest reflex in the body. If you even get a hair in your eye, you know how bad it feels.
Yeah.
So imagine a kitchen knife scraping the skin off your eyeball.
And there was no reaction.
No, the people just sit there like he's doing nothing to them. So that's the two kinds of surgery so far. The invisible
that's
surgery.
Amazing that he does it on one part of the body to affect another part of the body.
Well, an example, there was a Brazilian physician who was there, and he brought his daughter, and his daughter was up on the stage, and the physician went to go up on the stage with her, and he fell down, and he hit himself on a concrete pile or something that was near the stage. And Jal brought him up real quick on the stage and did the eyeball surgery, the eyeball scraping on him. And the physician asked afterwards, "Why did you do that to me?" And Jal said, "Because you broke a rib and you ruptured your spleen and you were bleeding internally, and I had to stop it."
He didn't know it yet.
He didn't know it. But sure enough, he went to a hospital in Brasilia and had an x-ray, and his rib was broken and his spleen was ruptured. And Jal actually told him, go to the hospital after he did the eye surgery. He said the eye surgery was to stop your internal bleeding.
So he didn't have to have any medical help when he got to the hospital, though?
No, he was okay. But, I mean, if he hadn't had the bleeding stopped, he would have had a horrible time.
Yeah, because like you said, you're out in the middle of nowhere.
Right. So we don't understand. We don't understand medically these kind of surgeries. That's why I call them symbolic surgeries. And then he does the third kind of surgery, which is just the kind of stuff that I would do. He cuts people and cuts things out of them and then sews them up. And then sometimes he'll hand them the thing he took out, like he'll cut a breast cancer out of some woman's breast and hand it to her and say, take this home to the pathologist and have them analyze it. So he does real surgery, like that kind of stuff, but rarely. Most of the time it's this invisible surgery. And nobody has to have surgery. People that go there think, oh, my God, he's going to cut on me, he's going to